What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Two Rivers Tuesday. My name is John, and I am hosting today because Maggie Colella had a baby. She is officially on maternity leave now. They got to welcome Eden Elizabeth into the world last Saturday, September the 30th. So I am joined by a very special guest today, Chris Jessen.
Man,
welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, we're so glad
to be here.
You're here. Former lead pastor of Two Rivers Church, Chattanooga.
As in no longer.
As in no longer. Yeah. You asked for a title of emeritus, right? You wanted to be called Pastor Emeritus?
Yeah, I signed the responsibility to, I think, Caleb Jones to give me a title that would carry me into perpetuity. And it was something like Supreme Emeritus Resident Pastor of Relaxation.
Okay.
I think is what it was, officially and formally.
Because
legally.
around here, Caleb said that you were his intern. That's what he's been saying.
Yeah. Well, it had some duties that he put on the job description in small print that I wasn't aware of.
Awesome.
Until I was assigned those responsibilities.
Well, former lead pastor, one of my best friends on the planet, husband to Katie, dad of 4 awesome kiddos. And you know, it's funny. This is not our first podcast together.
It's not. It's not. We've done a podcast before.
Yes.
One episode.
We did one episode of a podcast years ago in Brantley Robinson's spare room at his house. You remember? We called it, I think, Two Honest Pastors.
Double O.
T-double-O. We were too honest.
We were.
Two honest pastors.
Hence the one episode.
Let's just say we did one episode and one's like, I think we're done with this. I'm not sure who would want to listen to this.
Not us. So
and that's
certainly
okay.
Not the world.
That's okay. So here we are doing another podcast together. And before we jump into what we talked about on Sunday and some of the reasons why I wanted you to be here with me today, I did read that it was recently released that Usher is going to be the halftime artist at the Super Bowl. Have you seen this?
I didn't see it, but I did hear it. Yes.
Usher. So there is a chance that if the Kansas City Chiefs make it to the Super Bowl, which is, I think, a team of interest in the Jessen household.
We are.
Yeah.
Unless you saw the game last night.
I did not see the game last night.
It was terrible.
Really?
They played awful.
Did they get beat by the Jets?
They didn't lose.
Okay.
But they could have lost.
We digress.
Yes.
Hence why we don't have our other podcast. So Usher's going to be in the Super Bowl. If the Chiefs make it to the Super Bowl and T-Swizzle and Travis Kelce are still together, we could get like a total Usher T-Swift collab going, right?
That would be incredible.
That would be a pretty awesome Super Bowl to watch. Speaking of music, a question was asked in my life group last week, which I thought was fantastic. I think you would appreciate this. I want to get your answer to this. The question that we all went around the circle and answered was, if there was a concert this weekend that you could create and then go to. So basically, like, choose the opener and the headliner. And it can be whatever you're choosing because you're making it up and it's happening this weekend and you get to go.
Yes. What
is that concert?
Coldplay opening for U2.
Wow. That is hard to beat. And that's excellent. Have you ever seen Coldplay live?
I've not seen Coldplay, haven't seen U2. But I hear those two shows are some of the greatest experiences that you can have.
I have seen U2 live in Atlanta, and it was incredible. It was and I mean this, it's almost got a double meaning, but it was a worship experience. And you've got the entire arena singing along with him or chanting along with him. And, you know, when I was there, I was just imagining, like, this is like what it would be like in an epic worship environment.
Yeah.
You know, like it was just incredible. So what a great call. Coldplay opening for U2. I mean, that is mind blowing.
Yeah. Jesus could return at the end of the encore at that point. But yes.
So I actually said Coldplay as well.
Good call.
And then I was having a hard time deciding who would follow, like, you know, who follows Coldplay, right? But again, I'm making this up, so it doesn't really matter, right? So I chose Billy Joel because I'm a big Billy Joel fan.
Okay.
I love Billy Joel. I've seen him live. I was between him and maybe seeing Ben Rector, which would be an interesting combo, right? Coldplay and then Ben Rector. Yeah. I don't really.
We're gonna bring it down a little bit.
Yeah. I don't know. That would probably be a weird show, but it's
okay.
It's
your dream, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's jump in a little bit about what we talked about on Sunday. We kicked off this little mini series that we're doing, talking about how God uses people we least expect. We're calling it unexpected. And that's really one of the reasons I wanted to have you on. God can use the people we least expect. But here's why. There's probably not many people on the planet who know that you're a preemie.
Yeah, that's true. And was very early. 2 months premature.
2 months premature.
Yep.
And
I have milked that excuse for 44 years.
Yes, I say that in jest. If people are like watching this or listening to this, they're like, what are you talking about? You are totally making fun of him for being a preemie. That's because Chris has used it as an excuse for his entire life to get things that that normal people have to work hard for.
It's true. It's true. I have a handicap tag on my truck now. And so, preferred status.
All right. In all seriousness, if I can do that, we looked at how a generation in Israel grew up and forgot God. It's right there at the beginning of the book of Judges, after the people of Israel move into the promised land. And this whole generation, after like these titans of the faith who saw God do incredible things, after they died and moved on, this generation grew up and just totally forgot God, and they did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and they just they kind of lost all their bearings, and they were just swept up in the culture of Canaan. And we asked the question, how does this happen? And of course, this doesn't just happen, thousands of years ago. I mean, we can point to this right now in our own world. And so let's just talk about that for a second. How does something like that happen?
How does a generation forget God?
Yeah. I mean, or even just like think of it, maybe not like an entire, like a generation in a nation, but just even in a family, or, how does that happen? What are some things that contribute to that?
Yeah, I think I can only answer in a personal way. And I think for me, it would be for me to take the things that I have been taught from my parents and from those who have sown into me truth. It would be to not live them out authentically. No one can spot hypocrisy like our kids. So I think if my kids begin to see that as a whole, I tell them to live a certain way, have certain values, and then I don't actually walk those things out, I think they're going to move on from that which you espouse and say you value, and say, I'm going to carve my own path.
Yeah, I was just thinking the first thing I wrote down was just that parents stop growing. And when we stop growing, we stop modeling these things for our kids, and then we just kind of move on to other priorities maybe, and our kids don't see it in us anymore.
That's right.
And I read an article, a guy in my life group sent this out to a bunch of the guys today, and there's an old guy from the 1700s named John Newton. He actually wrote a song kind of keeping with the musical theme here. He wrote a song we're all pretty familiar with, Amazing Grace. And anyway, he talks about parenting. He actually adopted some kids pretty late in life, I think like after he was 50. And he wrote this. He said, embodying before your children what you expect from them is one of the highest forms of parental love, and it protects them from great harm. He goes on to say, many poor children are forced to blush every day for the behavior of their parents. Then he says, if you love them, be careful of laying stumbling blocks in the way.
That's good.
Yeah, so I just think we got to be modeling this stuff for our kids, and if we're not, then they're not going to see it. They're going to see it with flesh on, just becomes a bunch of rules.
That's right.
Right. Another thing I was thinking about was just how we stopped telling stories about who God is. And you just wonder if maybe that's what happened in back in Israel, just did those stories just get old and they just kind of stopped telling them, or they just assumed that the kids would know these stories about who God is, maybe they got it pounded into their lives by their parents, and they were almost reacting to that. You know, I mean, I could see that in our culture today.
That's right. Yeah, I think our hearts are captured by stories, and I love the narrative of the Bible, which is just a collection of stories of God's intervention and presence. And what captures our kids' hearts is when we sit them down and we tell them stories.
Yes.
And
Dad, tell me a story.
Yeah, there's a big difference between me preaching and confronting and correcting, and we all know that that's a part of raising up kids. But I think by the time we're done with that, we're tired. And often I spend too much time preaching, confronting, and correcting, and not enough time just telling stories on the front end, so that I'm not just reacting all the time, but then I'm just sharing these truths in the context of real life in a way that hopefully makes them lean in instead of have to kind of run away or protect and defend themselves.
Yeah, that's good. And I think just another way this happens, and it doesn't happen overnight, it just sort of creeps in, is we just get really busy. You know? And we get too busy to talk to our kids about God, to sit down with them and tell them a story, or to read the Bible with them, or to them, or to pray with them. And our kids get up and they grow up and they get older, and then they start putting themselves to bed at night. And I don't know if we've felt that transition, and some of that bedtime routine that's so good in their early years kind of gets replaced with homework and FaceTiming friends, and they're staying up later than you are.
Yeah, they're putting us to bed now.
Yeah,
it's like, all right, kids, it's
9:45.
I'm gonna knock off. You come tuck me in and bring me some milk. That'd be great.
Yes. You pray for me before I go to sleep.
Yep, really appreciate it.
So, yeah, but life gets busy. Okay, so we talked about a guy named Othniel. He was the first judge or deliverer in the book of Judges, and I said that I think Caleb, his uncle, and then later on father-in-law, which we don't have time to get into right now, probably had a huge influence on him. I mean, just Uncle Caleb, I imagine him sitting around telling stories around the campfire of the great and awesome God and all the things that he saw him do, and talked about 85-year-old Uncle Caleb who's like, give me that mountain. I'm like, gosh, I want to be that guy. I want to be that dad. I want to be that granddad who's like still like fighting hard, like old later on in life.
Full of fire in his belly. And we see lots of stories of men who kind of fade into obscurity.
Yes.
As we get older, we feel less relevant, and not so Uncle Caleb.
Right. And so it makes me think about his impact on Othniel and how our families have such an incredible impact on us. I'm wondering if can you think of, just off the top of your head, like some of the ways that your family, perhaps it was a specific family member, maybe it was just your family that you grew up in, like kind of influenced your view of God?
Yeah, for me, it's like a lot of men. It's my dad, and he came to faith after a second divorce, and but he knew he wanted his kids going to church, and so he would take us to church, drop us off, and leave. And then eventually someone said, hey, why don't you come too? And through the brokenness of his second marriage, I think he realized he was kind of at the end of himself, and met Jesus at Cedar Springs Presbyterian Church in Knoxville, Tennessee, and began really walking with the Lord in a really sincere and humble and consistent and faithful way. He would be the kind of person who would be all substance and very little flash. But in our family and our home, what we see is substance. It's not really about flash, for better and for worse. And I saw him reading his huge study Bible and doing his K. Arthur, big 3-ring binder studies throughout my childhood and into my teenage years. And I knew that he walked that walk and was generous. We didn't have a lot, but he always gave. He always served. And so he would be the primary spiritual influence in my life growing up, for sure.
And I just wonder if just seeing that, because you grew up in a home where you were going back and forth from moms to dads, and there was a bit of maybe instability there when your dad came to faith in Christ and began to walk with him, like to see him with his Bible open, I imagine gave you some sense of like security, stability, confidence.
Yeah, you don't know it then.
Right.
I didn't know what I was experiencing then. It's almost now retroactively looking back. So many things mean so much more. But yes, there was something that anchored my dad. That was deeper than our circumstances, deeper than how things were going financially, deeper than his own emotions or loneliness or the ups and downs of raising us teenagers. And I do think there was some safety and security in that. But more importantly for me, or as important, would be just looking back and seeing that, just as we said earlier, he walked it out. He did it. And that to me is what has inspired me to do the same and just to walk it out. Don't just talk about walking with God, walk with God. And that next generation who lives in your four walls will see it. And maybe one day we'll want to do the same.
And it's faithfulness over time, right? I mean, you're not even really talking about one specific event, although those events are important, but it's really a process,
That's right?
I mean, it's a process of faithfulness over time, and you didn't even know it then, like you said, but you look back and you think, wow, that shaped me. Yeah. So you are, and this is a product of this, I guess, like one of the most goal-oriented and driven people that I know. And I've been sucked into some of these challenges. Some people that may be listening to this maybe have been sucked into some of your big dreams and challenges as well. I think it's all for the better and for the fun. So I've seen this play out in how you lead your family spiritually. Just your drivenness and the goals that you want to have, and you want to be disciplined in this area of your life, and that's really kind of what it takes. So talk to us about some of the things that you have done to help point your family to God.
Yeah. Well, the stakes are really, really high, and I've got 3 boys and a girl. And when it comes to, in particular, my boys right now, as they're a particular focus, is I can't leave it to chance that they're going to understand, especially in this climate, what it means to be a man. I mean, there's so much chaos and confusion around that question. And then more importantly, what it means to be a godly man. And so about, I guess Oliver's 15. So about 6 or 7 years ago, I began to think hard and long about how is it that I want to define what it means to be a man for Oliver, my firstborn, who's now 15, and then his brothers who would follow them, so that I could give them a picture that's clear and then call them to that. Yeah. So a few things that I've done, and they're really, they're milestone kinds of events. The first is what I've called a 10-year-old adventure. And that's where I take each of my boys individually away for a trip. And it's an adventure. It's about doing something fun. So I say, hey, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? And can we find someone to stay with? Because we can't afford a lot here.
Yes.
And so we go away, and it's 4 or 5 days of us just spending time together and having experiences that with a big family you don't really get to have one-on-one. And then my goal is beyond just that time together. It's to begin conversations of substance around sex. I want to get in front of that before the world begins to inundate them. I don't want the narrative to be hijacked on, in particular with men, a really, really important and tragic subject. I affirm the things that I see in them, that I love, that I want to celebrate. And then we begin that conversation of what does it mean to be a man? And using Jesus as our guide, we've used an acronym of what it means to be a real man. And we talk about it a lot even now, which is just a man is someone who rejects passivity, accepts responsibility, leads courageously, and expects God's greater reward. And that's given us an anchor that when we drift, me and my boys, we can call one another back to that truth. This is who Jesus was. This is who Jesus is. And that's who we hope to be one day. So that's the big 10-year-old trip that we do. I do an invitation to manhood ceremony when they turn 13. And I let them choose, but gather together godly men that they admire, respect, and have invested in them. And you've been a part of 2 of those ceremonies, and I'm sure you'll be part of the 3rd, where I have men write a letter to my sons that do the same thing, that affirm the good that they see in my boys, that talk about their walk with God and give them some tips, and then just begin to paint a picture of what it could and should look like as a godly man. And it's so cool. We just, to me, it's as good for the men around that circle as it is for my son. Yes. You may agree. Yes. I mean, we all were snotty. Absolutely. Just this past January or February when we did this for Josh, and each man reads their letter, and then I learn things, and I'm challenged and shaped and encouraged. And they print those letters, we put them in a book, and that's just another opportunity for, as we drift, as my boys drift, they can go back and remember who they are.
Yes.
And what is truth. And they're at a point now, my boys, where it really is, I think, to become a godly man, you have to have a community of godly men invite you into that.
Yeah.
Family. And that's essentially what that is. We are inviting my boys into this family, and have been resources for my boys when dad isn't the guy that I want to go to, or I can't call dad because I'm in a situation that I don't want him here. They have other men that they can call and say, hey, it's either you or the cops, and I want it to be you. Uncle John kind of thing. So, and then the last thing is when they turn 18, and we're excited, and that is really going to be an affirmation and confirmation of manhood. It's running through the tape. You're a man.
Yes.
And there's some kind of a process that I'm on right now in terms of the journey to manhood, where I'm walking with them on some real specific truths as it relates to shifting from being a boy to a man.
And that is something you guys are doing right now, like in the mornings?
Yeah, it's what we're doing in the morning. So the boys and I were up at 7 o'clock this morning.
Yeah.
And I have to tip my hat to John Tyson, who to me is, a master at content and clarifying some of these things. But he talks about the 5 shifts that are necessary to become a man. And it's just straight out of 1 Corinthians 13:11, which says, when I was a boy, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things.
Yes.
And so this is that shifting from boyhood to manhood. And he articulates that through 5 different shifts that I don't need to go into, but they've been formative. And we look at biblical characters who help personify these aspects of the journey. So 10 weeks in the life of Joseph, as we talked about what it means to shift from ease to difficulty. Boys want ease, men embrace difficulty. And we see how Joseph became the man and the ruler that he was because of hardship.
Yeah.
And so it's been beautiful. So we do that. I will say that there are a lot of mornings that I want to throw my 3-ring binder at the boys
Yes.
because I can't imagine them caring less about what we're talking about sometimes. So if you think this is easy and fun, and when we get to the question and answer session, the kids just like pour their hearts out, it's most of the time not that.
Yep.
But it's so important. And William Ward says, don't judge each day by the harvest that you reap, but by the don't judge each day by the harvest that you reap, but the seeds that you sow.
Yes.
And I'm sowing seeds, and we're sowing seeds, no matter what age your kids are.
Yeah.
And so that's really what I'm going to be held accountable for, and what God and the Holy Spirit does with those seeds. I get to trust him with that.
Yeah. And I think that's so good. I think because there are probably parents who are listening who have tried things and they flopped, and you're just like, well, that didn't work. Let's not do that again.
Yeah.
Or we just we kind of get gun shy, or something. We just, that'll never work again, whatever. And it's really not about the results in the moment,
Yes.
right? It's about the faithfulness over time, like we were saying with your dad, and what you're doing with the boys, And that takes intentionality. That's one of the things we talked about on Sunday, kind of the 4 P's that I laid out at the end. It was plan it, pray about it, post it, and then prioritize. And so you are being intentional. There's something about the kids just watching you be who you are and watching and seeing Christ in you. And that's just kind of that organic presence, right, in their lives. But then there's also that intentional planning that's important. And so I commend you for that. And if anybody's listening or watching and want to know more about what you're going through with the boys, you said that was John Tyson?
Yeah, John Tyson, and it's called The Primal Path.
The Primal Path, yeah.
Tons of stuff online. And I'd love to be a friend who buys you a cup of coffee and talks about my journey and how
Yes.
it's been hard and what we've done and what hasn't worked and troubleshoot, brainstorm. There are a few things I'm more passionate about than what I'm getting to do with my boys. And if there's any pain that I've gone through that I can help somebody else with, I'd be thrilled.
Absolutely. That's awesome. So that's the planet part and being intentional. I talked about praying about it. And so this is something that Katie and I, it was sort of the light came on over the last couple of years. We've been walking through the teenage years with our daughters. And it was like, we were going through something, we were banging our heads against the wall, and we're like, we haven't even prayed about this, like maybe we should start there. And it's drawn Katie and I together in this. It's given us purpose in our prayer, together. But also it's just realizing that this is going to be a God thing. This is a spiritual thing. It's not a natural thing. That's right. And we can't just lecture it into our kids. We can't pound it into them. Like, we have to pray for the Spirit of God to open the eyes of their heart and to reveal their need for Him, and so, and to start to develop that character in them. That's and right. For the Spirit to fill them, and then they start to bear the fruit of the Spirit. So, that's kind of the second P, praying about it. We talked about posting it, and that's just getting the word around your house where your kids can see it. And I know you guys used to have a chalkboard. I don't know if you still have it. We do. There was a chalkboard in a prominent place in your house where you would sometimes write scriptures. I would sometimes leave little messages on that chalkboard.
Not appropriate for this podcast.
Not appropriate for the podcast.
You would often leave one consistent message.
I just wanted to
it's a theme.
Remind everyone.
Yep.
Why I was
healthy marriages.
Yes, healthy marriages. Anyway, we used to have something like that as well, a giant canvas in our kitchen in our old house, and we would write scriptures on there, and we could see it from the kitchen table and talk about it. It's just looking for every way you can just get it in front of your kids. The last thing is just prioritizing your faith. Again, we've been saying it the whole time. It's got to be in you, right? To be able to pass it on to your kids. And I think sometimes our own walk with God can kind of be the last thing, right? Because we have so much to do. We've got to work, and we've got to work hard, and then we got to get the kids to wherever they need to go, or we've got to take care of them, or feed them, or change their diapers, or get them to bed, and then we're just exhausted, right? And then there's our marriage we need to tend to, and sometimes I think that we maybe our spouses or God kind of get the leftovers, right? And the reality is God is what will actually fill us and fuel us and give us everything we really need to do all those other things.
That's right.
And so we need to prioritize that, parents, as we think about a generation that we want to see rise up and put their trust in the mighty God who does mighty things, right? Yes. Any final comments from you, Chris?
No, I mean, I think that, just what you were saying reminds me of a Paul Tripp quote when he says, "It's not my weaknesses that keep me from being a good parent, it's my delusions of strength."
Oh, man, that's good.
And I think it's just a reminder of the gospel.
Yeah.
And I think as a goal-oriented, task-oriented achiever, in terms of my DNA, it's real easy to try to will my kids into sanctification.
Yes.
Just like, how did that work for you?
Yeah, right.
And it's just, they're humans with souls, and they make decisions. And so I wrestle with wanting to make sure I'm as intentional as possible. But what I just need to really remember also is to show my kids how much I need Jesus.
Yes.
How desperate I am for grace, and how much of a mess I am.
Yes.
I don't model that as well as I need to, and I should, and that there's a vulnerability there, but I think, isn't vulnerability compelling? It's an invitation. Compelling. Come on, I'm with you. And so sneaking on the other side and putting my arm around them and saying, yeah, me too. So I think just an encouragement that all this stuff that you can do, and we're in a day and an age where there's too much stuff. There's too much stuff to do. There's too many ideas. There's too many podcasts. There's too many lists. There's too many books. And it's so overwhelming that the average parent is going to say, based on what you said, and I agree with, I'm too busy already. I'm not going to do anything.
Yeah.
And if you hear nothing, I think it's just like, just lean into Jesus yourself and know that that's the best thing. That's the best thing you can do, right?
Yes.
And if that's happening, then I think they're going to see something. My dad didn't walk me through the primal path. He didn't take me on these trips.
Yep.
But God is my dad too, and He used my broken dad to point me to Jesus and drew me to Himself. Sometimes in spite of my dad, and sometimes because of my dad.
That's a good word. I think that's a great place to end it. Thanks everybody for listening, and we will see you back next time.